So something important has happened at the New York Times, and I think it's very important for the Hindu community and the broader Indian community in general in India and overseas to know about it. So let's talk about it. Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Sharma Show. Thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you. So you remember the New York Times, the doyen of liberalism and truth and free inquiry that invited Imran Khan to write an article threatening nuclear war with India, that published articles about how minorities are being blatantly murdered in India and how saris are fascist. Yes, that New York Times. So there really used to be a time when a lot of these magazines, like the New York Times, they stood for the truth. They stood for free inquiry. They used to be accountable to the truth. But now it seems that these organizations are only accountable to the social media mob. So New York Times writer Bari Weiss, who's one of the few conservative writers and voices in the New York Times, recently tendered a resignation. And her resignation letter really captures perfectly what's wrong with New York Times and many such liberal publications today. So she wrote in her resignation letter that Twitter had become the ultimate editor of the New York Times as vicious progressive staffers there engage in the new McCarthyism. Weiss accused the Times of abandoning its journalistic principles to satisfy the narrowest of audiences rather than to allow a curious public to read about the world and then draw their own conclusions. Twitter is not on the masthead of the New York Times, but Twitter has become its ultimate editor. And I think that's a very important point. Another important point that I think she makes is how it is considered okay and acceptable for people to attack, abuse, and harass people just because certain people may have different views on politics and culture than them. This is increasingly seen as being very acceptable in liberal circles.
Good Lord, he looks like helmetless Darth Vader on meth. I don't know if this guy... I don't know if this guy is calling all the shots. It certainly looks like he's doing all the shots. Like, Steve.
In an op-ed in the LA Times, the political columnist David Horsey writes this. By comparison, Sanders looks more like a slightly chunky soccer mom who organizes snacks for the kids' games.
So I'm gonna go ahead and get this moisturizer in my hand. I'm gonna armor this face right up and just put it all over your face. Okay, like gravy. My face is a big fat biscuit. I used to not know what foundation was, but our great president was kind enough to take me to a Sephora, and he said to the employee, hey, you see that fella right here? Make him a woman. Pew, pew, pew.
Bari writes, still other New York Times employees publicly smear me as a liar and a bigot on Twitter with no fear that harassing me will be met with appropriate action. They never are. Another point that she makes, that the mistakes that these mainstream organizations made in terms of not taking Trump seriously, in terms of not taking the people that supported Trump seriously in 2016 and basically just ridiculing them. They have learned no lessons from those mistakes. The lessons that ought to have followed the elections have not been learned. Instead, a new consensus has emerged in the press, but perhaps especially at this paper, that truth isn't a process of collective discovery, but an orthodoxy already known to an enlightened few whose job is to inform everyone else. She noted recently how 2 staffers had lost their jobs, including former editorial page editor James Bennett, over the publication of an op-ed by US Senator Tom Cotton about violent protests and riots following the police killing of George Floyd, that the Times said fell short of our standards. So it's amazing that an editorial that may have been a little extreme, written by a Republican senator, and 2 people lost their jobs over it. But nobody lost their jobs for writing a completely dishonest article about India, full of cherry-picked data and cherry-picked incidents that basically tries to paint a narrative about how Hindus are trying to demonize Muslims in India over the coronavirus. Nobody lost their jobs when New York Times published an article about how 90% of the violence against Muslims was done after Modi came to power, which was again based on extremely cherry-picked data and had no basis in fact. But no one lost their jobs over an article full of such factual inaccuracies. That article didn't fall short of your standards. Nobody lost their jobs for inviting Imran Khan to write an article in the New York Times where he basically threatened nuclear war with India. Nobody lost their jobs over writing an article about how saris are fascist. Nobody lost their jobs after the the New York Times published such a racist cartoon as this. Nobody lost their jobs in all of these cases. I mean, seriously, you're so full of shit that you probably haven't pooped for 5 years. Someone at the New York Times can only lose their jobs if they upset the liberal crowd. And the liberal elite and the left have basically created two classes of people. One class of people is the protected class, which includes black people, Latinos, gay people, trans people, Muslim people, and only those black, gay, trans, Latino, Muslim people that agree with the left. Those that do not agree with the left are not allowed in this protected category. So you cannot criticize anyone or joke about anyone in this protected category, because if you do that, you will lose your job. Then there is the unprotected category, which includes, white people, Hindus, and those black, gay, trans, Latino, and Muslim people that do not agree with the left. You can say whatever the hell you want about them and nobody would lose their jobs over it. A great example that Bari Weiss cited was Cheryl Strayed's interview with the writer Alice Walker, who was a proud anti-Semite and who believes in the lizard Illuminati.
I'm gonna say it real slow for you. Gay frogs!
Yup, that's where we are. Weiss also mentioned something interesting, which was she was confident that most people at the Times do not hold these views but are cowed by those who do. And that is the issue here. That there are probably within this leftist ecosystem, there are probably people that think differently, but they're too scared to voice their opinions because they fear that they might get attacked, they might get publicly humiliated, and they might get fired from their jobs. See, basically, there's a concept called the Overton window, which is the range of policies politically acceptable to the mainstream population at a given time. It is also known as the window of discourse. In mainstream liberal discussions, that window has shifted to such an extreme that any divergence from these woke talking points is basically considered fascism. It's considered white supremacy, it's considered Brahminical supremacy, and it's considered Islamophobia. And look, I am not a fan of Bari Weiss. I don't really even like Bari Weiss. The sheer uninformed opinion that she has on a person like Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I really lost a lot of respect for Bari Weiss after that Joe Rogan podcast episode.
Kristen
Tulsi
Gillibrand. Oh, monstrous.
Monstrous?
Ideas.
Well, when she was 22, she had...
No, she's an Assad toady.
What does that mean?
She is
What's a toady?
I think that I used that word correctly. Jamie, can you check what toady means?
Like towing the line? Is that what it means?
No, I think it's like a...
Like, what did she say that
we have to look.
qualifies her?
I don't remember the details.
We
I've read
probably
it.
should say that before we say that about her. We should probably read it, rather.
Well, I have read it.
No, I mean, we should right now.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just so we know what she said.
Look up
I've had her
Tulsi
on
Gabbard.
here before,
Look
and
up
I really enjoyed talking to her. I like her a lot.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I like talking to her.
Okay,
I like
okay.
talking to her. I don't know about...
I think she's like the motherlode of bad ideas.
Whoa.
I'm pretty positive about that.
You don't know what you're talking about, do you?
But despite that, what really stands out is the way that her colleagues insulted her, attacked her, and put her down frequently in public. And Bari Weiss is a very moderate conservative, and even her opinions are considered far too extreme for the liberal ecosystem of the New York Times. And that's why I think it's very important for Indians to pay attention to this as well. Because this is the kind of abuse and this is the kind of bias that the Hindus also endure from the New York Times. Because the Hindus have been deemed fascist, because the Hindus have been deemed to be part of this unprotected group, it's okay to attack them, no problem. It's okay to call them names. It's okay to publish these racist cartoons about them. No issues whatsoever. No one's gonna lose their job. But such attacks, such cherry-picked information, such jokes, such cartoons will never be made on Muslims because all of that will immediately be called Islamophobia. See, mainstream organizations like the New York Times used to be accountable to free discussion. They used to be accountable to reason. Not anymore. Now they're only accountable to Twitter. Whatever Twitter decides is what they will do. This is why this traditional media, like CNN, like the New York Times, like the Washington Post, they're crumbling. That is why people's faith in them is crumbling at this point. And that is why new media and alternative media has seen such an explosion. Whether or not you like Ben Shapiro, whether or not you like Steven Crowder, whether or not you like the Young Turks, whether or not you like all of these YouTube alternative media shows, you can't deny the fact that mainstream media has basically brought this upon themselves. At the end of the day, I don't have a problem with it because I am part of that alternative media. So if mainstream media wants to shoot itself in the foot, be my guest. And that brings me very conveniently, right, to my point, which is, if you like the Sham Sharma show, if you want to support alternative media like the Sham Sharma show, make sure to click on the Patreon button down below and become a patron of the show. And I also want to ask you guys, do you think that the mainstream media like the New York Times has basically become an echo chamber? No opinions outside of that echo chamber are actually ever seriously entertained within organizations like the New York Times. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comment section down below. Once again, guys, if you liked today's episode, make sure to leave a like, leave a thumbs up. It helps me out. Leave a comment. It helps the channel out a lot as well. And if you like the Sham Sharma show, if you like this English channel, if you like the content that we put out here, if you like today's episode, and if you haven't subscribed already, then what are you doing? There's the button right there. It's a big old button. Just click on it, subscribe, make sure to press the bell icon as well. And we have an episode here and an episode here that you should watch as well. I'm sure you'd like them too. I will see you for the next episode. And until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you guys soon.